Hello, everyone. This is the Anonkun podcast, and I'm MZ, and I'm joined here by Spuds.
Hello, I'm Spuds of the Apocalypse.
Uh,
Welcome
so,
to the welcome to
yeah,
the Questing Community Hub podcast. What is this even called?
yeah, let's go with that. The Quest podcast, you know. Anyway, let's just get into things and introduce our topics. Today, what we're going to be focusing on are two quests, mainly, and the writers that write them. They're quite popular quests on Aiken, and they're both related because they're both about demons. One is Descendant of a Demon Lord, and the other is Promises of Power. But there's another reason why, it's kind of famous, and that's because everyone seems to get very mad about these quests. So let's have a quick chat about it. So, Spuds, the first one, Promises of Power. How much of it have you read?
Uh, I read basically as soon as an update comes out, and I've read the whole thing. Yeah,
Okay, so you've read everything. Same as me. Then, when did you first get into it? Like, when were you there from the first
I was
session?
there. I was literally there from the opening post.
Okay, same as me then. So yeah, the quest has been pretty salty since essentially the start of it. I mean, there were quite a few arguments just in basic character generation.
Yeah,
But
I remember that people were salting because they misunderstood the basic premise of the quest, even in the very first thread, and they thought it would be like focused on the school or something, in spite of the whole thing being marked prologue.
yeah, it definitely. I don't know because I think that really wasn't a mistake on Contrived's part. That was more a mistake of the people reading. Like nothing overtly wrong with what happened there. I do think, however, that having like a relationship was sort of uh, it's very funny in retrospect, honestly. Uh, but I don't know. So, what did you think of the prologue overall?
I think it was maybe a bit too tell. I don't know. It was overall handled quite well. I
Mm,
don't think there were some mistakes in Promises of Power, but I think those mistakes were not in the prologue or in chapter one. I think those mostly came after that.
yeah, I think that's a very good point. One thing I did really like were the mechanics around summoning a demon.
Yes,
I think
yeah.
I thought
That
those were very fresh and interesting.
and I mean the very fact that the mechanics are involved in that way, it does sort of inform the audience that this is not something that is only going to happen once. It sort of implies that this is going to be something that is going to come up again eventually. The whole way it was structured, it's sort of informing people through format and not necessarily
Overtly,
without making it explicit.
yeah, I thought it was pretty interesting. My first impressions of the quest were that we'd have one we'd have one demon do a task for them and then move on to the next relatively quickly. But of course, that didn't happen.
I expected that each one would be like a full arc in a manga or something like that, like like a whole novel, and that's kind of what happened. You know, each demon it would be a novel in a novel series essentially.
Yeah, I think the first one dragged on a little bit too long, though.
I mean, maybe I think there were some superfluous chapters in that from a like an if this was going to be a published novel would not shouldn't have been there ultimately.
I think a big part of it as well was that people were very hesitant to go forth with a lot of things because of the corruption mechanic. it made people really wary to do some things, but then it didn't really matter because they gained like 1 million corruption from rerolling anyway.
Yeah, and I think it was interesting how that was like the elements of the character came out in play in an interesting way. And because they discussed her strategy like in the later parts in the first interlude they had a discussion about how Cass what is her no she is called Cass. There's too many
Yeah,
fucking Casses, but um how she behaves, how she waits and gathers information and then resolves the entire deal at once. And I think that's an interesting story structure where the first part of any story of the story is like passive observation until you find a vulnerability, and then everything happens at once. That's a very interesting way of having a story work.
yeah. I think that there was just a bit too much of the passiveness. For example, there was that girl at the inn, and her subplot was a bit. It came off very weird because there was obviously a very big disconnect between what the QM wanted and what the players wanted there. It came across as a bit strange in places, um, but I think overall, after all the salt, the it was resolved all right. It just came off a bit hasty.
Yeah, no, I think that subplot was badly handled in general, but I also there's an but I think what really burned bridges, what really made contrived decide to stop having votes at all was it was ultimately his fault, I think, when he started adding trap options. Whenever a QM starts adding trap options, that's like at that point, nothing good is going to happen. I've never seen a QM having trap options turn out well.
Yeah, definitely understand what you mean there. It was always a bit towards the end of the voting period. Some of the votes felt very frustrating, especially because they're always into really high danger situations, and there was a lot of salt depending on like where the dice went or how the vote went on. But I honestly think that sometimes a player base is just very caustic, and it makes sense to change. I'm not sure if removing votes was the best way to go around it, but um, I think it's a bit more effective. I think now without votes, even though there is a lot less player interaction, it does still flow a lot smoother. And there are suggestions from players, which I do like that he is still incorporating that into the quest.
Yeah, no, I actually think that in many ways, Promises of Power still has more reader interactions than many quests because he reads off the mentality of the players and incorporates it into behavior in a way that feels very natural.
Yes,
I I still think that it was a mistake.
it was a
He
mistake
I
to,
well
yeah,
no, I mean it wasn't necessarily a mistake that he instituted dictatorship like he says it, but at that point. But the only reason it was necessary, if it was necessary, and I'm not sure about that either, was because he had burned a lot of bridges with his players by putting in trap options and doing things like suddenly Cass decides to go back home even though it makes no sense and the vote didn't do anything about that. And all of that stuff that he did to alienate his player base was his fault. I mean, the player base was caustic before. It wasn't the bad. It was one of the more hostile ones. But that
yeah,
was when it really stepped up, and became a problem.
I think part of that as well is, I don't know, I think it's more the players were just, average Acom players at first, but like as I've learned firsthand, if you poke a bear, prepare to get mauled. So
Yeah, well, I think it wasn't necessarily the. I think that to some extent he did attract a certain player base which is inclined to salt. For some reason, people who get mad at things going wrong are also the ones who like quests where things go wrong all the time the most.
yeah, that's a very true statement. Um, yeah, Ian brings up a good point where he says that trap options would have been a lot more reasonable if the players hadn't basically thrown all of their points into cunning, which I think is a fair criticism.
Well, I mean, yes, I think it would be interesting. I mean, it might have been like an interesting element that because you picked low in this stat, there's like a hidden drawback in the form that the decision making process is mistimed. But even I don't think that's a good idea. That sort of well, I think meta integration of mechanics can be interesting, but trap options are ultimately so toxic that even if they happen with as a result of the players choosing all the brute options in Jarjan, it wouldn't have improved the quest.
I think that you could possibly do trap options well. Like, I don't think the concept is inherently dumb, but if there's like hints that the players are that there's something fishy, but the players can, attempt to vote for something else if they're observant. Like, for example, the players got magic used on them, and it's mind altering magic, and all of the like, and there are options, the default options, but they're dumb.
Yeah.
I think something like
Well,
that
I
could work.
I, I think yeah, to some extent, having meta integration might be a good idea, but it's not. It's still a very questionable method of making making like or for an example, if a character gets a concussion and suddenly the options are all confused or whatever stuff like that, it can be interesting. It can add a lot, but it's risky. It can
Yeah.
fuck up a lot.
And I think Exalted Anon has a good point where he says, it can certainly be interesting, but only if you don't overuse it. Like if you keep it as something special.
I've actually been thinking of doing something like that, but not messing with the options, but like making the writing more confused or following a concussion. Like I don't know, adding more phonetics or something like that. Like having
Yeah.
people because in most writing language is edited to be non-confusing. Like if you look at the way people write, that is not how people speak.
Yeah.
They'll have pauses in the middle of what they're saying. They'll say they'll say ah, they'll repeat themselves without realizing it. And I was thinking about taking inspiration from the way people actually speak to sort of simulate confusion following a concussion. And
I think,
that's sort of
yeah, no,
similar to what you were talking about, yeah?
yeah, I think that's actually a very interesting, very interesting thing. Exalted Anon brings up Exalted Quest doing limit break vote with one word options that are all confusing. And I do think that's a decent, like messing with the voting process is, I think, a good way to sort of emphasize the state a character is in. Like, for example, when your character's drunk, like this is more in the writing, but like if your character's drunk, having the narration go off onto tangents, or again, um, like having things be intentionally confusing if your character's in a super high stress situation. I think those are interesting ways of messing with the meta narrative. But Mathrian brings up a point that it does break immersion when a superhumanly cunning MC goes along with stupid votes, but that is a big problem with writing an intelligent protagonist. When you have somebody who is smarter than the players or the writer writing them, it's very difficult for that person to act consistent at all times because,
Yeah,
like,
that's a problem even in normal stories, and where people write people smarter than them.
yeah,
And
like,
one way I've seen commonly of dealing with this is to present situations in which is a perfect answer, and the character the character sees it without no sees it easily or immediately or whatever. That's like the entire basis of Sherlock Holmes, that the the writer constructs a situation which might lead to these consequences, and Sherlock Holmes observes it immediately.
yeah,
And
it's weird to think. Well, now that you brought up Sherlock Holmes, there is a very weird situation, but you know the Sherlock Holmes TV series, that's a big problem. That has a very big problem with people with the character being portrayed being smarter than the writers because a lot of the time it's done. You end up with a character basically doing magic because the writer doesn't know how to properly resolve a plot point with an intelligent character having an ingenious solution, and it all just comes out as a bit of an arse pull. So it's a very fine line to walk. And Promises of Power, getting back to the main topic, sort of wavered around it a little bit.
I think
It's
I think Promises of Power handled it better than many stories. And I think quests have the potential of handling it better than many stories. But that's not necessarily. You can do things like. One way of doing that is whenever an option is too dumb for the character, like someone mentioned, they remove any option which would obviously not work and would be completely dysfunctional. This and what players can come up with a lot of plans more than any individual person. It's like theory of collective intelligence in action, where like the aggregate is more active, is more accurate than any individual person's perspective, except maybe the absolute smartest one. So like
yeah,
yeah, so they all come up with different plans. The QM can like veto things which wouldn't work according to their perception. And overall, I think it's easier actually to portray an intelligent character as a quest, but you have to work at it.
I think definitely like when portraying an intelligent character, there are definitely sort of challenges with doing it. But one thing that I do really like the approach that Contrived is doing regarding since players only write in suggestions and he picks the best one, I think that's one of the better solutions for having to deal with an MC that's too dumb or too smart. Because if you have an average intelligence guy, nobody's going to blink an eye if he has like one time this ingenious solution, or if one time he makes a complete idiotic move. Because he's an average guy. Average people do that. But for a big, super smart person, I think that since it's only having write-ins, being able to for Contrived to pick what he thinks the best course of action is, even if it wouldn't have gotten a load of votes in a straight vote. I think that's an interesting way to deal with the dilemma.
Yeah, but and the thing is, I used to regard that less positively. But as I thought more about it, I wouldn't have batted an eye if someone ran a TG quest like that. So why should I care if someone runs an Akon quest like that? Because
Yeah,
there's been a lot of TG quests that have done that, like where they just take whatever plan they think is best and integrate that somehow. Like
yeah. I think that as far as
mm,
Promises of Power goes,
I actually have an example of that. Of I think
oh yeah,
I think it's called Samsara quest, and it ran for like 10 or 12 threads or something on QST, and I like that a lot. I'm not sure why, but it's kind of a silly quest, but they he did that thing exactly where he portrayed a genius character by like taking the whatever input he perceived to be smart from the audience. And this is reflected in the very first thread where someone comes up with a way of making the first thread is about recreating an ancient magic system that relies on stars being in a specific pattern, and someone comes up with the idea of like doing an illusion so that the magic perceives that the starscape is the same as it was a million years ago when this magic was again invented. And that's like directed the course of the quest. And there were several options, like there were several times where the quest took a direction in that manner, and I thought that was an interesting thing.
Yeah, I that's a very good point. I do like the one thing I also like the idea of would be sort of again coming back to like challenging the ways that players view the quest and view the options and how that interacts with the main character. You could probably pull off some stuff regarding like mind influencing magic with things like that. One quest that actually did it well, even though I normally like generally I hated the way they did mind magic in it, but oh gosh, it was this really old Anonkun quest. It was one of the biggest ones done by the person who did Ember's Edge. Gosh, give me a sec to just check it out. Sorry. Yeah, so it's done storyteller. Yeah, the Evoker. There we go. One thing I really
Mm.
enjoyed about the Evoker was how it dealt with mind magic. So at one point, one character gains the ability to use like magic that manipulates the mind, etc. And the main character, the main villain, also had it, and it was very frustrating. But when a minor character had it, one of the things that did happen, which I really liked, was that generally the narrative sort of became it sort of painted her flaws, etc., as cute and endearing, and really upplayed her strengths and sort of like also made notes on how more beautiful she was, etc., focusing on the character because she was passively using magic to make people like her more. And I think that's a very interesting way of messing with player perceptions and how they vote. And I think that although it does get people really mad, I think it can be pulled off well. Yeah,
Mm. And the thing about that is that you need to be a good enough writer to actually who is actually able to control people's perception of a character, to actually reliably make people like a character not based on their actions, which would be same either way, but like in the writing itself. And that I don't think that's a thing that everyone can manage.
yeah. Um, I think that Mathrian brings up a very big problem with having votes done sort of like not in the traditional way, is that you do have to trust the QM a lot because it's very difficult to assume that QM will always take the best option instead of the action that will make the best story, even if that involves messing with the player for a bit. Because it like if you do that, it is a bit railroady, and that can be frustrating for a player.
Sure, and I think that's especially notable when it comes to Contrived because he has betrayed the trust of the players in the past in that
Yeah,
manner.
yeah. No, I think he's getting better though.
I mean, I think Promises of Power is great. It's a great quest. It's a great story. Uh, I'd probably buy a novel based on it, honestly. But and I think is getting better. And I think to some extent, I've talked to Contrived about this. And part of the problem with Promises of Power is that he didn't expect it to be like 1/10th or even 1/20th of how popular it was.
Yeah. Because I
And
think
that's
his only
far.
previous quest was like the 8chan quest, which had a very small audience. And it can be intimidating going from a small audience to like a peak of 60 people all shouting and clamoring for attention at once.
I think he got up higher than that. But in any case, and that also was why he included certain elements because because he was pandering to the audience, like the main character being a lesbian or whatever, and the quest being not safe for work, and that wasn't actually what he really wanted to do with it. But he wanted to get players, so he pandered a bit,
Mm.
and and he was more successful than in his wildest dreams, and that caused a lot of problems for him because he didn't know how to relate to his massive player base.
Yeah. One thing I do like though is getting away from his flaws for a moment. I don't think it's fair to just roast a guy for, admittedly, some parts of roasting are deserved, but I think he does deserve a bit of praise. Like, I think the world building in the quest is absolutely top notch. The way the magic
No,
works.
yeah, yeah, no. I think, like I said before, I'd read if he made a novel, I'd buy it in a heartbeat. Yeah,
Same, probably.
yeah, like he has chops. There's no doubt about that. Like he is one of the best quest writers when it comes to like his raw ability. Even when it comes to interacting with his audience, he isn't that. He is getting a lot better, and he has gotten a lot better, and he will probably continue to get a lot better. So, like, I mean, I've sucked his dick before. I think he can take some criticism.
Yeah, fair enough. Um, I, generally speaking, I think that when all things are said and done, it's a very strong quest. It definitely has its flaws, but again, uh, aside from the world building, I do think that one of the most interesting things he did actually was the first demon, Sermine or Kermine or however the hell you pronounce it. I think that's a very interesting character. It's very sort of difficult to um, like get go into her backstory because he writ up all of her backstory and then deleted it later because he didn't like the because the players were complaining they didn't like the direction it had taken. But I do really enjoy the way the two characters interact. The main character and the demon are it flows very naturally. There's sort of like a hidden story that you do try to want to uncover. There's a lot of lore behind it. It's very interesting to go into, and I think that's probably one of the best aspects of the quest.
Yeah, no, I think the demons in general are quite interesting. I think Kraven is also quite interesting, not just Sermine.
Yeah,
Uh, and it's interesting in that they they are clearly they're simultaneously extremely intelligent, but also, or not maybe not extremely, but very intelligent at least. But they're also irrational actors. They can't stop themselves from doing certain things which harms them. They
yeah.
can't they can't help their nature somehow in spite of their intellect.
It makes them feel like, for lack of a better word, it makes them feel very human in a sense, like very relatable because they do have flaws that they play into, and I understand that's part of their nature as being demons, but it helps them come across as sort of like an interesting character. Well, there are the main two demons so far, and since we're moving on to probably include a third, we can only hope that that one is as interesting as the two we've already gotten.
Yeah, no, I think Contrive is probably going to manage that, but we'll see.
Yeah. Generally speaking, though, I think it's a pretty strong quest. Um, it's got some flaws in it, but if there's anybody who hasn't read it but wants to read it, I definitely recommend that you give it a try. It's it, honestly, it's better if if you're reading and not participating, because you can just ignore all the salt, all the crying, and just read through what is actually a pretty nice, very interesting story.
Also, in the interests of ethics in quests journalism, I should disclose that I am kind of a friend to Contrite, and we play computer games together quite regularly.
Oh, that's fine. That's pretty cool, actually. What games do you play?
We've mostly played Vermintide.
Fids likes that a lot. Never tried it actually. Is it any good?
Yes, like it takes all the good stuff from Left 4 Dead 2 a bit. No, from Left 4 Dead, and adds a lot of good shit. And
Hmm.
it's just flows better somehow, you know?
I might have to buy it next time I have money to do things. All right. So I think it's been like just about half an hour. So I think the second half of the Salt cast can begin. So nobody here.
Yeah.
If you don't know who nobody is, they're a QM on Aiken. They've made a couple of pretty decent quests, all for myself, which is a very strange experience, but not entirely unpleasant. But the one that they're mostly famous for, famous being in relative terms here, is Descendant of a Demon Lord. Uh, so, um, Spuds, you said you read the first part quite a while ago. So, what did you think of it?
I think that it didn't feel like it wasn't well, it's like I recently I recently read Stephen King's book about writing, and he talks
Yes.
about how he hates plot. Well, he hates plotted out novels. He all of his stuff is like situational. He places his characters in situations and they act them out. Descendant of a Demon Lord does not feel like it's a plot. It has a plot. Like it doesn't feel like it has had a direction at the start. And as far as I read, which I think I dropped out when there were like a pharaoh or something. I don't remember very well. But as far as I could tell, there was not a plan for for the direction of the quest, and neither was there a very strong situation. Like there was no this is how the world is and what nah, or this is what where you are and what do you do to act with that. The situation that started off that quest, which was quite weak, and it was quite confused, and I think that's influenced the quest to sort of keep moving in uh, in a sort of confused manner.
One thing that is very I think one thing that is very noticeable is throughout his writing, uh, basically in Descent of the Demon Lord, there are two sides. Basically, the good guys, which are the humans, and then the monsters, demons, etc. With the main characters starting in sort of like the human camp, it's very evident from all of the detail that goes whenever he speaks. Whenever the main character refers to like the human nation, it's very obvious that he planned for a lot more um, of that's shown. And I think he said at one point that he never really thought the players would immediately like leave the academy and basically elope with their waifu. It's and I can see why he must have had like a big plan, and it all just got completely destroyed with what they say, no plan survives first contact with the players.
Well, I guess no, I think that's quite likely. And like I said, it's influenced the quest to keep moving in a confused direction because he based it on a plot essentially. And when he lost the plot,
Mm.
and then that he completely lost the direction, and he didn't know what to do.
I
I don't
think
know how this.
no, I think that's definitely one of his flaws as a writer. I think that if players are following sort of roughly what he wants to do and what he's prepared to do, I think he's a fantastic writer and he writes some really enjoyable content. But if players suddenly make a really unexpected decision, then I think it's really tough on him and he sort of struggles to resolve his issues. Like Fids brings up a big point where he says like that was a bit of a bad situation with the vampire lolly that led to some disruption because he just didn't know how to deal with it. All of his plans were being routinely destroyed every so often. Um, it's very difficult for him, definitely. Um, it's really strange to think that there's basically a whole nother quest that he did want to do that we never got to saw regarding the time at the academy because there are characters, there's plot like Celes was going to have a sister there. Very it's all very sad to like I don't want to say it's sad because what we did get a story, even though it has its up and downs, it is still quite enjoyable. But it is very strange to think there's a whole nother story that we'll never get to see. Um yeah. They're
Well,
speaking
isn't that what quests are?
yeah,
A
that's what
hundred
quests are.
stories of which you will only ever see one.
Yeah. Um Fritz is bringing up in chat that originally Drashin, or however you pronounce it, was this vampire who was going to be initially a minor antagonist like the players was supposed to like defeat, etc. And they were so incompetent that the players found her endearing and tried their best to, help her out. And it led to a lot of stuff like a suicide attempt and a horrible, horrible mess that eventually led to the main characters doing some bad things and, you know, sealing her soul inside them and then taking control of her warband. It was a very sort of chaotic period of time, a super big derailing. But I think
Yeah,
that
no,
after,
that I would read that far
yeah,
to where the whole mess happened and the plague and so on, and that's like.
I'm sorry, it's
But
just so
yeah,
funny to think
I
about it.
I agree with no, I agree with Cataplebus here. He says throw a cute vampire lonely at Akon players. What do you expect? I actually discussed exactly this on my first podcast I participated in, and I talked about how you make characters actually try nay, be hostile to villains, and I talked about how making it personal. But the thing about if you throw an enemy, like if you throw anything female as an enemy at Archon players or even TG players, you have to make you have to try really hard to make that character unlikable or hateable even for them to not try some sort of diplomatic thing toward them. I mean,
Yeah,
there's a few exceptions, like demonic corruption, the old Nox quest. I remember that he tried to tempt his players with loot by having this midnight inspired character, but they would have none of it. They said fuck, nah, fuck you, fuck her, and fuck all of this shit, and basically turned away from it. But that's so they went against. they went against like both what the QM wanted and what their general way of behaving.
It's I think that came to its detriment, honestly, at Nox Quest, because it sort of became sort of boring and like a waifu collection fest. The only time I like
Well,
waifu
yeah.
collection fests is when you have to beat the waifus to get them. Otherwise, it's just no fun. But
Well,
yeah,
you've done waifu collection fests where you didn't have to beat them.
yeah, I know. I hate myself. That's a very common trait of people who are spooky. It's fine to criticize your own writing and recognize its flaws, and it's very easy to get trapped in your own pitfalls. But as long as you're aware of them, you can try to make it better next time.
Now, I have made my opinions on on waifu collection very clear, but I might as well repeat it because who cares? I'm gonna do it anyway. I think that any relationship larger than three characters, like one protagonist and two love interests, is too many.
Yeah. I think Fids also brings up a good point, going back to Descendant of a Demon Lord, is the it's sort of, I think nobody sort of not messed up, but he didn't consider things from player perspective. Not only was the vampire sort of made out to be pretty strong, but generally speaking, the reason the MC left the academy in the first place was because they just saved a monster because they felt bad about it. And the players just weren't prepared to do that again. Um, all things considered, though, I think that nobody's biggest flaw is definitely unpredictable stuff. But um, honestly, like realistically
I
speaking,
missed the last like 10 words you said. Can
oh
you repeat
sorry,
that?
like his biggest problem is definitely again like unprepared, sudden changes that really throw him off guard. He's basically scrambling for a solution and sort of meandering for a bit before the players settle down and he can hash out a new plan. You can see that along with a lot of his arcs, like the arc where he goes to the bee city, the insect city, whatever. I thought that was, to start with, I thought that was very nice. It just dragged on for a bit too long. And that's the problem with all of his arcs, I feel, that they generally speaking, once they start, they have a really good beginning, they get going really good, but they sort of drag a bit to the end, and then some silly decisions are made to get people annoyed. Then it sort of ends sort of. Um, Generally speaking, though, the endings aren't too bad, and I do like the cast of characters that have been accrued, even if the best character of them all is basically ignored because it's a disgusting blob of sentient despair.
I
Uh,
missed the. We're having some issues with.
oh
At
dear,
least I
connection.
am on my end with the voice connection, and we're having quite long delays and some robotics. The whole thing about that stuff. But
All right.
I think you said something about best character you missed or something, and
Oh
sentient
yes.
despair.
Yeah, the best character in the quest is like Loki. It's not the bat. It's not the giant. It's not the giant dragon. It's a sentient blob of despair. That is the cutest, the nicest, the sort of best character. They play off the main character so well, and I'm really disappointed that everybody keeps forgetting about them because Despair is like unironically the best waifu. You should kill yourself if you don't agree. Like down with the bat, up with Despair. Yeah.
I'm not sure despair was a character at the point I stopped, but
It was I think, oh gosh, I think the players found the sentient blob of despair was uh like they were in a bar and the person just whooped up to them because of course the main character is incredibly depressed and not really depressed, but it's basically a broken human being. And the sentient blob of despair sensed a kindred spirit. And then the player eventually bought them from the whorehouse or whatever. it's just a really fun character, all things considered, and I think that's nobody's
Well,
biggest strength.
I see. I think that's a pretty weird place to employ a sentient blob of despair. Honestly.
No, because like the sentient blob of despair, just it can like take control of a person. If you've ever seen the Monster Girl Encyclopedia, it's like the dark matter.
I've only read like small excerpts of MG posted on TG. Never actually gone through the thing myself.
Yeah. Well, there's basically like a hollow human shell that's also there. Um, all things considered, it's like a very. I think nobody's biggest strength is definitely making um, decent characters.
Mm.
Yeah, it's. I think that a lot of people don't like Bat, and I can see why because she's very possessive. But I think that everyone in Cersei's warband is very has their own personality, and they're not limited to just one or two gimmicks, which again is a problem that I, as a writer, have trouble with, and it's impressive to see him get around it. Uh, I
Well, I
will,
mean,
yeah,
all of my characters so far are only one of two gimmicks. I need to put in some effort in developing them. But my quest is very much in its early stages. So we'll see if I actually fix the problems it has, which are many.
yes. Writing, it's a lot easier to critique than it is to fix, generally speaking. Mathrion brings up a good point that Kveld is a very interesting character um, because of split loyalties and generally speaking uh, how she works as a assistant to the main character. They're very reliable, but of course they all have their own. She has her own issues, etc. Um,
I mean, like I said, it was long ago, and it didn't really catch my interest ultimately. So uh, I don't know what you're actually talking about, to be honest.
nice. Um, yeah, sorry, Kveld's Kaz is still part of Descendant. Uh, so yeah, have you read any other of Nobody's Quests then?
No, well, I think I read a bit of all for myself, but that's it.
All for Myself was very like, I think that was his first quest, and honestly speaking, I think it was done very interestingly. It knew what it wanted to do, and I think it's not even a one shot, but it's like very
Is
self-contained.
if I remember correctly, wasn't it like they had a scenario and then they played out that scenario to several different results?
Yeah, it was very interesting seeing how each choice sort of um how it had a cascading sense of like cascading number of options, and the ways that some of the endings were written were quite interesting, like kidnapping, etc.
Well,
Honestly,
isn't that related to the discussion, to what we discussed about Descendant before? That there could have been an entirely different story. Maybe he should have a second route, like he had in like he had in all for myself, and write that when he's done with Route One. I don't know.
I think that might be an interesting. He might just want to move on from the setting entirely. I don't think you can really have the two things going concurrently,
Sure.
because meta
Mm.
knowledge is always a big thing to consider. But maybe, I don't know, maybe he does it. It's a very interesting quest anyway. Um,
Well, I think it probably wouldn't work all that good. Well, you know.
yeah, I suppose. Um, anyway, I do have to say though, it had Descent of Demon Lord. It had an okay start. That was a very rocky period around Drasheen, but I think that right now it's really found its feet. Nobody has sort of matured as a writer a lot through writing it, and I think the later parts of it are very good. Even if there are even if there are slow parts during it, there's still a lot of good. And again, the characters are probably my favorite thing about it. So I would definitely give it a try if you haven't, since you dropped it before. But I would recommend you give it another try, Spuds, because all things considered, it's actually now that it's come into its own, it's pretty strong.
Yeah, the problem I'm having right now with quests is that I want to read them on my Kindle, and there's no fucking way to do that. I mean, I could probably like use uh, an add-on or something for my web browser and just pull the all of the text, but that would bring me a lot of extra shit, which would make it irritating to read. So I wish that someone could make like an Anonkun EPUB converter or something, and then I'd read a lot more quests and I'd read them a lot faster.
I'm pretty sure Fids tried doing something similar to that, actually.
He did? What?
I'm not sure, but like there was a time where Aiken's like uh uptime problems were really, really bad, and like everyone was considered that Fids was gonna fucking like kill the quest. Not that Cass was the website was gonna die completely and everything would be lost. So I think it was Fids made like a thing that like backed up quests. Am I right on this, MMD? Oh yeah, okay, it was the archiver. I don't remember what format it output into
Well,
though.
I mean, if it puts out to any format, I can basically use Calibre to convert it.
Shoved it out in the format it comes in. Nice. Yeah. The funny thing is, like regarding Fid's his contribution to Aiken, all things considered, he's done so much for the website, it's ridiculous. Like the button to turn off anonymous posting that's right next to the chat is like the most convenient feature I've ever seen. I can't believe it's not baseline. Oh my god. And Fids is
Yeah,
even the one
well,
who's
I
recording
mean,
this.
isn't there like an Anonkun extension somewhere? I've never used it. Apparently, people are irritated. They are irritated by lots of stuff, and there's an extension or something that fixes a lot of that, like being able to anonymize and de-anonymize with a press of a button from anywhere and stuff like that.
Mm. I think as far as things go, um, or I don't know, we can try and dig up the archiver from Aiken's archives and see if we can get that working. Um, but one thing
Yeah,
I do want to actually do
that
right
that
now,
would actually help a lot with the podcast because then I would actually be more motivated when it comes to reading up on all the quests
yeah.
we're supposed to discuss.
Well, one thing, since we're getting close to about an hour, it's we started a bit late, but it is still getting quite late. One thing I want to do is I do want to give a heartfelt thanks to Fiddlekins for all the work he's done for the questing community. I mean, he's the one who's got Podbot working. He's made so many like little fixes to Aiken that make browsing the site a lot better. He helped me with my quest, Path of Sense. He edited for it. He edited it for a bit before he got bored. All things considered, he's like a very nice chap, and I just wanted to have this little time to say thanks.
I remember that in the old Discord, I gave him his own role called fucking magician when he created Podbot. I should probably give him that again.
As far as things go, like for a while, I thought that he wasn't even sorry, for a while I thought that he wasn't even like made a co-mod of Aiken, and that all the shit he did was just him like fucking around with HTML and breaking it completely. But I think he does have moderation privileges. At least I hope so, because otherwise, like, whew, that's that's pretty weird. Anyway, yeah, I think that is a good thing. We should make Fids. We should give uh, him. Let's give him the role called New Role. Fits Fids perfectly, I think.
I don't know. I liked fucking magician. It's very accurate, I would say.
It's
But in any case, I think we're coming up on the end now, right? So
Yeah.
how
Well, I think we're
about
coming in the end.
so how about maybe you tell the audience when you're gonna run next? Are you actually still running quests? I'm not sure, to be honest.
Well, yeah. The thing is about my Spheri, like I try to run every day, but trying is a lot different from doing. Over the past couple of days, I've had some really shitty internet connectivity issues, and I'm really glad that my internet didn't spontaneously spaz out in the middle of this recording. Um, it's been difficult for me to run, but I do want to run every day, and I will probably be running Path of Ascendance tomorrow. If you haven't heard of it, it's a smut quest about
No, I've read. Oh, we were talking to the audience. Never mind. Keep going.
it's fine. It's a smut quest. It's got some really silly things in it regarding like the character transforms from a dude to a girl. There's a lot of angst. There's a power suit that's a sentient waifu. Yeah, it's a pretty weird ride. I had a hiatus for a bit, but I really enjoy running it, and it's very it's it's a ride for sure. I'll probably be running it tomorrow at like 7 o'clock p.m. British time. So why don't you tell us about your quest before we head off?
Well, first of all, I have one question for you, MZ. Are you ever going to run an actual serious quest?
What do
Uh,
you mean an
like
actual serious quest?
one
All
which
of my
isn't a
quests
joke.
are serious.
Something.
But
I'm asking you a question, honest question here. Are you ever going to run a quest that is not ironic or a joke or anything like that? Are you going to run a serious quest ever?
real talk, like Path of Ascendance was supposed to be like the first proper serious quest I did. There was a lot of prep work that went into it behind the scenes. Like it's just got a little mention at the front of the quest, but like between me, Fids, Hexa, also known as Winter Now, and Broop, another Aiken QM, like they helped me hash out a load of stuff regarding the system of the game, like how things would flow, sort of like the story, the background, like the basic way the plot would progress, how the main character would come into his powers, how like the history of the world would have evolved regarding post alien invasion, etc. They were all, like a very big help. Like Hexa as well, he really added his own, special esoteric touch. Um, all things considered, that was supposed to be my first serious quest, but um, I think Alerni said it best a while back that basically any quest I do can only sustain itself for about like most a couple like 100,000 words before it inevitably sort of jumps the shark. So, long story short, Path of Ascendance was supposed to be my first proper serious quest, um, but it failed horribly. Um, and yeah, Fiddlekins, it was engrams that he hexjected. Uh, I am considering doing another serious quest, but I do have a lot of quests I want to tie up first. I do have a lot of quests going on right now, and I know from experience how annoying it is to as a player for a quest you really like to just like fucking die. So as far as things are going, I do want to finish all of the quests I do first, or at least one of them before starting another. And I want to eventually finish all of my quests, even if the main problem I have with FAD quests is that there's basically no way it could possibly end. Um, but I think, yeah, one day I think I might, if the right mood strikes me, I might ask some people to help me, sort of shout a setting, etc. I might run another proper serious quest once again.
Yeah, all right. Well, I run Dogs of War every Sunday. I've this will be my third session. Hopefully, I'll maintain 100%, 100% running every Sunday for the duration of the quest. I hope so, and I'm going to make my damn best to do so. And in spite of whatever the curse is going to throw at me, of which it has already done a couple of things, like my laptop screen's broke and my mouse has stopped working, and like all of that fun stuff. But Dogs of War is as serious as you can make an isekai quest. It's isekai played straight, almost to the extent where it starts to become ridiculous.
Yeah. Sorry, just to answer the questions in chat. MMD, yes, I will finish For the Glory of the Goddess. The way I do questing now is I basically focus on one quest for 2 or so weeks to sort of really focus on it and get some proper work done before moving on to another one of my unfinished quests. And Matthew, and when I say serious quests, it's basically because all of my quests are like they're basically silly smart quests. They're very pulpy, and in tone they're very light-hearted and there aren't consequences. It's very slice of lifey. Even the one where you fight genocidal bug monsters is really camp and happy. A lot of the time, there's no edge. So I think a serious quest in that regard is like something that I put a lot of time in, a lot of world building into. I'm not just doing what I do for most of my other quests and just pulling out plot and shit by like my butt. It's actually amazing nobody calls me out on it because I make up 100% of the bullshit in some of my quests. Like on FAD, I do all the world building on the fly. I think,
Well, I mean, none of your quests have this enough substance that there's any point about calling you out on it because it's so obvious.
yeah, exactly. So I think that I will do I don't know, Path of Ascendant's got a lot of people calling out the world building. The world building in that is decently detailed. But yeah, before we get distracted, we should probably end it. So thank you all for listening. And Spuds, thanks for joining me once more.
I've had a great time, and I hope all of you have had a great time as well.
Yeah. So Spuds might not be probably not be able to make it next week, so I'll try to find a replacement co-host. And run them.
Maybe you can bring E back on.
Yeah. All right. So everybody, thanks for listening. I guess we'll end it now. See you later.